we are going to look at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's contribution to the social justice in India. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, popularly known as Baba Saheb Ambedkar, was one of the architects of the Indian Constitution. He was a well-known economist, politician, social reformer and eminent jurist. Ambedkar's efforts to eradicate the social evils like untouchability and the caste restrictions were remarkable. In his early career, he was an economist and a professor and a lawyer. The leader throughout of his life fought for the rights of the Dalits and other socially backward classes. Ambedkar was appointed as first law minister in the cabinet of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He was posthumously awarded the Bharata Ratna, India's the highest civilian honor, in 1990. Ambedkar was a multifaceted genius whose outstanding contributions in such diverse fields as law, sociology, economics, political science, public administration, anthropology and comparative religion are well recognized. He was a crusader for social justice and a champion of the constitutional democracy. His ideas on democracy and governance have great influence on Indian society and its form of governance. He has a deep understanding of complex and diverse Indian social systems and an abiding faith in the social transformative role of constitutional democracy. Bhimrao Ambedkar was born to Bhimbai Sakpal and Ramji on 14th April 1891 in Madhya Pradesh. He was the 14th child of his parents. Ambedkar's father was a Subedar in Indian Army and posted at Mau cantonment in Madhya Pradesh. After the retirement of his father in 1894, the family moved to Satara in Maharashtra. Shortly after, his mother passed away. 4 years later, his father remarried and the family shifted to Bombay, where he cleared his matriculation in 1908. Ambedkar was a victim of a caste discrimination. His parents hailed from the Hindu Mahacaste, which was viewed as untouchable by the upper class. Due to this, Ambedkar had to face severe discriminations from every corner of the society. The discrimination and humiliation haunted Ambedkar even at the army school run by the British government. Fearing social outrage, the teachers would segregate the students of the royal class from that of Brahmins and other upper classes. The untouchable students were often asked by the teacher to sit outside the class. After shifting to Satara, he was admitted to a local school, but the change of school did not change the fate of young Bhimrao. Discrimination followed wherever he went. In 1908, Ambedkar got the opportunity to study at the Elphinstone College. Besides clearing all the exams successfully, Ambedkar also obtained a scholarship of 25 rupees per month from the Gaikwad ruler of Baroda, Shayaji Rao III. Political science and economics were the subjects of which he graduated from the Bombay University in 1912. Ambedkar decided to use the money for higher studies in United States of America. After coming back from the United States, Ambedkar was appointed as a defense secretary to the King of Baroda. Even there also he had to face the humiliation for being an untouchable. With the help of the former Bombay governor, Lord Sydenham, Ambedkar obtained the job as a professor of political economy at the Sydenham College of Commerce and Economics in Bombay. In order to continue his further studies in 1920, he went to England at his own expenses. There, he was awarded the honor of Doctor of Sciences by the London University on the title The Problem of Rupee, and he was the first Indian to pursue a doctorate in economics in abroad. This was published as a book in 1923. Ambedkar also spent few months at the University of Bonn, Germany, to study the economics. On 8th June 1927, he was awarded a doctorate by the University of Columbia on the thesis The Evolution of Provincial Finance in the British India. Usmania University honored Dr. Ambedkar with D.Litt. honorary causa for his achievements, leadership and writing the Constitution of India on 12th January 1953. Dalit movement. After returning to India, Bhimrao Ambedkar decided to fight against the caste discrimination that almost fragmented the nation. Ambedkar opined that there should be separate electoral system for the untouchables and lower caste people. He also favored the concept of providing reservations for Dalits and other religious communities. Ambedkar began to find ways to reach the people and make them understand the drawbacks of the prevailing social evils. He launched a newspaper called Muknayaka. It means the leader of the silent. It was believed that one day, after hearing his speech at a rally, Sahu IV, an influential ruler of Kolhapur, dined with the leader. The incident also created a huge uproar in the socio-political arena of the country. Political career in 1936. In 1936, Ambedkar founded the Independent Labour Party. In the 1937 elections to the Central Legislative Assembly, his party won 15 seats. Ambedkar oversaw the transformation of his political party into the All India Scheduled Caste Federation, although it performed poorly in the elections held in 1946 for the Constituent Assembly of India. Ambedkar objected to the decision of the Congress and Mahatma Gandhi to call the untouchable community as Harijans. He would say that even the members of untouchable community are same as the other members of the society. Ambedkar was appointed on the Defence Advisory Committee and the Viceroy's Executive Council as a Minister for Labour. His reputation as a scholar led to his appointment as Free India's first Law Minister and Chairman of the committee responsible to draft a constitution. Bhimrao Ambedkar was appointed as the Chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee. He was also a noted scholar and eminent jurist. Ambedkar emphasized on the construction of a virtual bridge between the classes of the society. According to him, it would be difficult to maintain the unity of the country if the difference among the classes were not met. Constitutional provisions for Dalits. The inception of the Indian Constitution in 1950 was a significant event not only in the political history of India but also in the history of the social justice and human rights. At the same time, it has opened up a new avenues of human welfare and development in the Indian subcontinent by providing equal rights and privileges to the citizens at large. The Constitution of Independent India was meant more than a mere legal manuscript that likely to structure the norms of governing, defining the functions of the various key institutions as well as the political actors. For the society as a whole and particularly for the underprivileged sections who were exploited in multiple ways over the centuries, especially due to the prevailing dominant social order of Hindu society. The process of constitution making during the 1940s was thus laden with various sets of expectations and requirements. In fact, it was assumed that the new constitution would be effective enough to terminate the unending patterns of exploitation based on gender, caste and religion and bring increasingly sought changes in the deeply hierarchical and unequal social structure so one could live with dignity and possess equal civil rights. It was intended the first movement in the lives of the millions of people, particularly the depressed communities, when they were likely to receive the equal treatment and entitlement after the adoption of the new constitution. Dr. Ambedkar has been considered as the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. The text prepared by Ambedkar offered a wide range of constitutional safeguards to guarantees to all citizens, for instance, socio-economic rights, civil liberties, freedom of religion, abolition of untouchability, and the prohibition of all forms of discrimination among others. He argued for extensive economic and social rights for the depressed classes. In addition to the constitutional rights, he eventually won the Assembly's support for introducing a system of reservations of jobs in the civil services, schools and colleges, particularly for the members of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. These measures are popularly known as the policy of inclusion that makes endeavors to include the deprived and overlooked classes in the society. In this way, Ambedkar was a valiant fighter for the cause of social justice and social equality and thus known as the leader, liberator, hero, emancipator, representative of the voices of the socially overlooked classes. He fought his entire life for the development of the depressed classes. He stated in the Constitution Assembly that, "I know today we are divided politically, socially and economically. We are a group of warring camps and I may go even to the extent of confessing that I am probably one of the leaders of such a camp." In this way, he explicitly mentioned his commitment for the depressed sections of the society. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar believed that Constitution is not just a written text, but it can be an effective tool to ensure justice and equality to all the sections of the society, especially to the downtrodden sections of society. He wished to achieve several objectives with the help of constitutional provisions, and in fact, certain provisions can be traced which clearly reflects the influence of his vision on the Indian Constitution. However, it is not necessary that both Constitution and constitutionalism exist together. For instance, The Constitution of India gives great importance to right to freedom, Article 19 to 22. But an individual even does have a right to choose their life partner freely, which is most evident in the large episodes of the honor killings. This fact can be further observed in the various prevailing religion-based, caste-based and lineage-based customs and practices which have been continued to violating the basic rights of an individual in the post-colonial society. Constitution in India has been framed in such a way in the post-colonial period that it makes endeavor to fulfill those expectations which were created by its people while they were under the yoke of the Britishers. Post-colonialist constitutions therefore have an agenda of development and even stand for the social change. Perhaps this is why the Myron Weiner, a well-known constitutional expert, says that the Indian Constitution is more than a set of rules guiding behavior. It is a kind of charter, a set of goals and expectations. While presenting the draft constitution to the Constituent Assembly in 1948, Ambedkar maintained that there was nothing to be ashamed of borrowing because nobody holds any patent rights in the fundamental ideas of a constitution. Perhaps this is why the creators of Indian Constitution took inspiration from both domestic and foreign sources. Ambedkar had very commitment for the social causes and he remained committed throughout his life for the upliftment of deprived sections of society. He was known the pioneer of the idea of the social justice in India. He succeeded to arrange certain provisions in the Indian Constitution for ensuring justice to the oppressed sections and creating the just society. In other words, the Indian Constitution challenged the dominant conceptualization of justice, equality and welfare in the post-colonial Indian society, which disregard a bulk of the populace who in fact needed it most. Also, it made an effort for transforming the hegemonic understanding of the social order in society as well as establishing the just and equal society. Social justice as an exile of public institutions. Ambedkar's socio-political vision can be summed up as to social justice. To him, social justice is another name of liberty, equality and fraternity. These principles, he says, have been derived from Gautam Buddha. He has emphasized the Buddhist religious roots of his philosophy of social justice. Ambedkar may not be the first person to talk about social justice, but has the distinction of making it as a defining feature of social transformation of an egalitarian Indian society featured by graded inequalities. The three principles of liberty, equality and fraternity are not to be treated as separate aspects in the Trinity. They form a union of Trinity in the sense that to diverse one from the other is to diverse the very purpose of democracy. He said, without equality, liberty will produce a supremacy of a few over many. Equality without a liberty will kill individual initiative. Without fraternity, liberty and equality could not become natural course of action. It would be require a constable to enforce them. He pleaded for a public spiritedness to build institutions and resolve conflict between equality and liberty. His concept of justice is firmly rooted in the synthesis of social equality involving freedom and liberty with the economic equality and human brotherhood based on self-respect and dignity. He described himself as a progressive radical, distinguishing himself from liberals and Marxists depending on the case. Ambedkar recognized the critical role of state and administration in ensuring social justice. He strongly advocated the developmental, ameliorative and interventionistic role of the state. He is critical of oppressive role of the administration in British India, which was totally controlled by the upper caste. Ambedkar fought many battles during the British rule to make it more responsive to social justice issues. Reason and justice are the two powerful concepts used by Ambedkar to understand and judge the actions of state and its institutions. In Ambedkar's scheme of things, social justice is the institutional exile. A close reading of some of his original writings about democracy clearly uncover the fact that B.R. Ambedkar had very optimistic view of democracy. He considered democratic politics as an effective peaceful means to emancipate untouchables from the diverse patterns of exploitation prevailing since the ages, as well as radically alter their way of life. Ambedkar thus defined democracy as a better form of government than all other forms. In this context, he observed, you have now a way of bringing about change and improvement in your life conditions. That way is through political actions, through appropriate laws, and you can make government provide for you what are now denied: food, clothing, shelter and education. And hence, instead of resorting to rosary counting or patterns, you should now depend on the political path that will bring you liberation. In his writings, Ambedkar had strongly pointed out a contradictory nature of life in the Constituent Assembly, that is, political life possessed in a non-discriminatory charter, whereas socio-economic life, similarly to the past, continued to retain an unfair and unequal nature. More specifically, he claimed that in the political life, we will be recognizing the principle of one man, one vote, one value. In our social and economic life, we shall by reason of structure continue to deny the principle of one man, one value. Ambedkar gave so much importance to education. He believes that education is essential to moralize and socialize the individuals, especially the backward classes, to have a cognizance of self. For him, education facilities should be provided to those who are illiterate and backward, and on the other, to those who want to wipe out of the roots of caste system in order to realize the ethos of democracy at the ground level. In this context, Ambedkar observed, to give education to those who want to keep up the caste system is not to improve the prospect of democracy in India, but to put our democracy in India in a greater jeopardy. Article 46 further, as argued earlier, emphasizes his vision which directs the state to take steps to promote the education of the weaker sections, most importantly the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The credit also goes to the Ambedkar for the illiteracy programs and free education up to the matriculation guaranteed by the different state governments. Later, the right to education, Article 21A, has become the internal part of the Constitution, which is an earlier part of the directive principles as Article 45. Democratic society as the basis of a democratic governance. Ambedkar paid close attention to nature of power and governance in his writings. He is great social democrat and his major areas of work was on constitutional democracy. Ambedkar viewed democratic society as an essential prerequisite for democratic governance. For him, democracy is primarily an associated mode of living. The roots of democracy are to be searched in the social relationships in terms of associated life between the people who form a society. He rightly observes that social and economic democracy is the tissues and the fiber of political democracy. He rightly observes that social and economic democracy are the tissues and the fiber of the political democracy. This broader understanding led him to argue the precedence of social reforms to political reform. In social reform advocacy, Ambedkar was greatly influenced by the ideas of the great 19th century social reformer of Maharashtra, that is Mahatma Bapule, that is 1827 to 1890. Ambedkar strongly advocated in the Constituent Assembly for making social democracy a basis for a political democracy. By social democracy, he meant a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality and fraternity as principles of life. In a speech which was the last one he made on the Constitution on 25th November 1949 in the Constituent Assembly, Ambedkar sounded a warning. On January 26, 1950, we will have equality in politics and inequality in social and economic life. We must remove this contradiction at the earliest moment, or else those who suffer from inequality will blow up the structure of political democracy which this assembly has no laboriously built up. He said that political democracy erected on the divisions, inequalities and injustices of traditional Indian society would be like a palace built on cow dung. Cow dung may be sacred and useful, but very fragile. These contradictions may provide partly an explanation of many undemocratic features of administrative behavior in India. As said by one scholar, that our administration form is Weberian, which is based on universal principles, and it is a Cautilian in practice, which rationalizes discriminatory practices based on caste, community and power. Constitutional morality as the basis of governance. Ambedkar played a very important role in drafting the Indian Constitution. He was a great constitutionalist with an abiding faith in the constitutional means to achieve social transformation. Though appreciative of a Marxian criticism of capitalist exploitation and Marxian advocacy of egalitarian goals of society, he strongly disapproved Marxian ways of achieving these goals. In the Constituent Assembly debates, he warned the nation of dangers to constitutional government. He pleaded that we must always stick to constitutional methods for achieving our objectives, political, social or economic. It is interesting to note that the social revolutionary who passionately criticized inhuman Hindu social system prescribed constitutional methods alone for correcting those ills and advancing social and economic development. In a significant statement, Ambedkar said, "The first thing in my judgment we must do is to hold fast to constitutional methods of achieving our social and economic objectives. It means that we must abandon the bloody methods of revolution. It means that we must abandon the method of civil disobedience, non-cooperation and satyagraha. When there was no way left for constitutional methods for achieving economic and social objectives, there was a great deal of justification for unconstitutional methods. But where constitutional methods are open, there can be no justification for these unconstitutional methods." Ambedkar strongly advocated for constitutional morality as the basis for governance. Traditionally, governance is referring to forms of political system and manner of use of administrative power in utilizing country's economic and social resources for development. Responding to the criticism for including forms of administration in the Constitution, Ambedkar said, "While everybody recognizes the necessity of diffusion of constitutional morality for the peaceful working of democratic constitution, there are two things interconnected with it which are not unfortunately generally recognized. One is that the form of administration must be appropriate to and in the same sense as the form of the Constitution. The other is that it is perfectly possible to pervert the Constitution without changing its form of the administration and to make it inconsistent and opposed to the spirit of the Constitution. In the sense, the constitutional morality is the morality of Constitution. It is not a natural sentiment, but has to be cultivated. Democracy in India was only, as Ambedkar put it, top dressing on Indian soil, which is essentially undemocratic. Our people have yet to learn constitutional morality. In this context, Ambedkar considered inclusion of provisions of neutrality of civil services, autonomous public service commission for recruitment of civil services, accountability of public services to political representatives, etc. in the Constitution as necessary to insulate them from the vagaries of legislature majorities. A constitutional morality requires the sense that despite all differences, we are part of a common deliberate enterprise." Representative bureaucracy. Ambedkar strongly argued for representation to disadvantaged and making it a constitutive basis of state and administration. Like John Rawls' difference principle in his theory of justice, Ambedkar identified principle of special treatment to address the question of social justice in polity and administration. John Rawls, a strong advocate of equality as a foundation of justice based on his idealized original position, a position from where all human beings started with equal status, recognized the need for special treatment of least advantaged members of society if it makes a difference to the principle of equality. To Ambedkar, there is nothing more unequal than treating unequal as equal. Ambedkar's advocacy greatly influenced the Indian constitutional provisions for rights of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and reserved representation for them in legislature and administration. Ambedkar considered struggle of oppressed of representation in legislature and administration as a part of struggle for their liberation. Representative bureaucracy is necessary for democratization of bureaucracy. He used to draw inspiring examples from world struggles of oppressed people for liberation, particularly from French and American revolutions. The strong message he conveyed to depressed class is to take responsibility to liberate themselves, representation in political and administrative power to deprived sections of society is an emancipatory measure. Debating on relative results of parliamentary and presidential forms, Ambedkar preferred parliamentary form for the ability to provide broader representation to diverse groups in sharing of power instead of presidential form, which may provide more stable political executive. The representation versus stability debate on the forms of government is an example of how Ambedkar looked at the structures of government from the perspectives of disadvantaged sections of society. Other social movements. Earlier in his trade union days, Ambedkar organized the textile workers and formed a militant group of followers. The other campaigns include the temple entry movement and access to the safe drinking water. The most important resolution that sped up Ambedkar's mission was one moved by S.K. Bole in 1923, allowed the untouchables to exercise the right of drinking water at all public places, walls and dharmashalas, which were built with the maintained out of the public funds. Ambedkar was looking for social reforms in the sense of reorganization and reconstruction of Hindu society on the basis of equality. He was looking completed salvation. There was still conservative feeling, unmoved like a mountain, not ready to accept equality based society. He wanted to fight for it. In 1950, Ambedkar travelled to Sri Lanka to attend a convention on Buddhistic scholars and monks. After his return, he decided to write a book on Buddhism and soon converted himself to Buddhism. In his speeches, Ambedkar lambasted the Hindu rituals and caste divisions. Ambedkar founded the Bharatiya Bauddha Mahasabha in 1955. His book, The Buddha and His Dhamma, was published posthumously. On October 14, 1956, Ambedkar organized a public ceremony to convert around 5 lakh of his supporters into Buddhism. Ambedkar travelled to Kathmandu to attend the 4th World Buddhist Conference. He completed his final manuscript, The Buddha or Karl Marx, on December 2, 1956. Since 1954 and 55, Ambedkar was suffering from serious health problems, including diabetes and weak eyesight. On 6 December 1956, he died at his home in Delhi. Ambedkar writings on constitutionalism and democracy are of a great contemporary relevance. His warning on democracy to retain its form and give place to dictatorship deserves serious concern. He warned India against hero worship. He pointed out that India was prone to bhakti cult, the cult of religious devotion, and that we tended to worship our leaders as heroes. That according to Ambedkar was not in conformity with the principles of democracy. He quoted the famous words of Irish patriot Daniel Cornwell that a man should not be grateful at the cost of his honor, a woman at the cost of chastity, and the nation at the cost of its liberty. Ambedkar exhorted India should never put its liberty at the feet of any man, however great, and surrender its freedom and liberty. The culture of hero worship and authoritarian style of functioning may result in unsetting established systems of governance and diluting administrative norms and traditions. There is a competition in India among the political class of all colors to claim Ambedkar's legacy without much attention to practice his radical ideas of social transformation and social justice.